right, we've made it to week 15 of your Social Security, Social Security, I always get them mixed up, Social Security Workers' Comp and Bankruptcy course. We've done all of Bankruptcy. The next week is your overview of workers' compensation. This module, we're finishing up Social Security Disability. So we've gone through what Social Security is, when it was established, what the difference between SSI and SSDI is. We've gone through what gainfully employed means and who is entitled to which kind of disability benefit. Now we're going to get into how do you prove it? How do you prove that in fact you're disabled? We've gone through the application and we've talked about the fact that you need to have medical providers, your medical providers, provide records, reports, test results, anything that they have that will help your claims examiner at DDS figure out whether or not you are disabled. We've also gone through that there are some claims that automatically get passed through, and some claims that we're a little specious of, that we're going to take a little time, orthopedic injuries, things that can recover. Social Security is really hesitant to go ahead and allow the claim. So, how do we prove that you are in fact disabled? Well, you have to have your medical sources, right? You have to have your treating physicians. Well, what does Social Security consider to be an acceptable medical source that they can have confidence in relying upon? We're not doing shamans. We're not doing people who read tarot cards. We are going with pretty tried and true kind of medical providers. Licensed physicians, either an MD or a DO, licensed psychologists, licensed optometrists, licensed podiatrists, and speech language pathologists. If you're not familiar with a speech pathologist, they are people who work with people. I don't know if you remember when you were in first or second grade or kindergarten, some kids might have had a lisp or a stutter, and the speech pathologist would work with them, or they couldn't say their R's. So speech pathologists work with how your mouth works and if you're able to speak. Okay? What kind of evidence does the DDS look at? Well, again, anything they've got. Records, lab reports, x-ray reports, anything that they have, they will consider if it's from these sources. Okay? But the important thing is that you need to be complete, thorough, and timely. So when you file your application, you need to make sure all of your medical professionals know, hey, I'm filing for disability. Please release everything. They'll have you sign a release form. And then when Social Security wants them, they can get them. Okay? If there are hospitals or medical, rehab centers, psychiatric hospitals, anything, you need to make sure that those records are also included. Your physician can also write an opinion letter. Now, does that mean that Social Security is going to say, aha, well, Dr. Smith says, therefore? No, but they will give some weight to it. Now, when Social Security is not real comfortable with your medical evidence, they may ask you to do what's called a consultative examination, or a CE. CEs are performed by physicians who are employed by Social Security. There are set locations, and they're called independent doctors. They're not really. They work for Social Security. You go, you're paid your mileage. You don't pay for the exam, and the consultative examiner will prepare a report after they look at you. Okay? If the CE is inadequate, if you don't think that the doctor really did much, you can appeal if you're denied because of that, you can appeal just because you think the medical examiner didn't do their job. Okay? Now, the Social Security Administration is going to look at several factors with respect to your disability. They're going to look at your pain. They're going to see if your if your claim is based on pain. They're going to see whether or not you're exaggerating that claim. And what they're going to do is they're going to look at the medical evidence and then look at the pain that you're talking about. There are things called expedited determinations. Compassionate allowance cases are one of them. So if you present with leukemia, cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Huntington's disease, Alexander disease, there's a whole list of them, actually 4 pages of them in your book, in chapter 5. If you present with any of those, Social Security will fast track you, and it's called a compassionate allowance case, where they know you're not going to live. They know the symptoms once you're diagnosed. They don't even have to fool with it. You're fast tracked. The same kind of goes with terminal illness cases. If things like you have AIDS, cancer, again, lots of different cancers, the DDS will fast track those cases also. Also, if you are a military wounded veteran, Social Security handles those claims, and those are also fast tracked. Okay? So, who gets to decide whether or not you have a valid claim or not? DDS is the Department of the Social Security Administration that handles initial claims. DDS stands for Disability Determination Services. Okay? Once you complete the initial application, the field office sends everything to DDS. They handle new applications, a reconsideration claim. So if you're turned down and you ask to be reconsidered, DDS will do that. A second initial claim, you can apply as many times as you want, and those are just called initial claims. So second, third, fourth initial claim, DDS will handle. And they will conduct continuing disability reviews. So they're going to periodically pull your file to see whether or not you've improved to the point that you don't need the payments anymore. Okay? DDS has claims examiners. They have medical consultants. It is kind of a closed club. It's so much of a closed club that your chapter 6 of your book actually contains a form letter that you can use to send to DDS that says, hey, I don't like this claims examiner. I think that they are not following the rules. I think that they have a grudge against me. And I want a different claims examiner. In my book, it's on page 162 and 163, where literally you outline what you are applying for disability services for, what your condition is, and then you can basically say, I don't like this claims examiner. I think they're corrupt. Again, it is such a closed club that you sometimes do know certain claims adjusters, at DDS or claims examiners that are off the rails. They're no good. And so sometimes you have to say, I'm sorry, I need somebody else, and this is the reason why. And it happens so frequently that it's in your textbook. Okay? There's a special unit of DDS called the Quick Disability Determination section. And with those quick determinations, you have one of those kind of presumptive disabilities, a cancer, terminal illness. Also, there are some disabilities that are, no matter what, you are going to be determined to be disabled. Some certain mental conditions, schizophrenia, blindness, deafness, those kinds of things. The quick determination unit of the DDS will handle those claims. Okay? If you are not substantially gainfully employed, that's your first hurdle as your claim is examined. The next step is DDS will see how severe are your impairments, and if your impairments are severe enough, then they look to see, well, can they do their prior job? If you have, blindness and you used to be a taxi driver, Uber driver, well, clearly you can't do your former job. If you were a lawyer prior to your disability, let's say you were in an accident and you lost your hand, you probably still can do your job. So that's an important part of this disability analysis. If you can't do your prior job, can you do another job? And if you can do another job, well, then we really need to see what your residual functioning capacity is, your RFC. RFC is where Social Security, DDS, looks at your disability, says, yeah, they're disabled. Yeah, they can't do their former job. Yes, they're not substantially gainfully employed. But can they do something else? And that's when they look at your residual functioning capacity, RFC. And they look at things like, what can you do? You can't do this, but can you do these things? And there's a list in your book. Can you exert yourself? Can you lift? Can you carry? Can you push or pull? Can you do light work? Is your posture so affected that you can't do physical work, or can you do bending? Can you climb? Can you kneel? Those are the kinds of things that they'll look at. Can you do physical manipulation? Do you have fine motor skills? Can you feel things? Do you have your vision? If you have a visual impairment, can you do something? Is there some kind of corrective measure? Or are there glasses? Is there something that will help your functioning capacity? Me, I'm legally blind. I know I have contacts in, but seriously, I am legally blind. So, but because I can wear corrective lenses, my residual functioning capacity is just fine. Are you able to communicate? Some people have, cerebral palsy issues where they have trouble speaking and communicating, but maybe they can talk on the computer. The advent of all of this technology has sort of changed this idea of residual functioning capacity, because maybe you can't work in an office with a lot of people because you have anxiety, but maybe you can work at home on your computer. Maybe your anxiety is not as bad when you're at home. So they're really going to look at all the different components of what you physically can do and mentally can do, right? They're going to look at whether, if you have a mental disability, can you remember things? Can you concentrate? How are you with social interaction? Are you able to adapt to different circumstances that you might run across at work? Okay? So all of those things come into play when we're looking at your RFC. We're also going to look at your age, your education, and your work experience. So if you are above a certain age, the expectation, of course, goes down. Can you still do sedentary work if you're older? Some examples are, if age 55 is kind of your threshold. If you are above age 55, your RFC may be calculated to include some sedentary work, because the expectation is that your body can't do what it used to do. And I'm here to tell you that's true. After a certain age, it's a little tough. Although I did see the movie Top Gun last night with Tom Cruise, who's older than I am. I want what he's taking. I don't understand how he can do what he can do. All right, they're also going to look at your education. What kind of training do you have? Do you have a high school diploma? Did you do some college? Did you graduate college, graduate degree? What are you able to do based on your education? Could you do something if you had more education? Are you capable of doing it? What's your work experience? Some factors that will be considered for your work experience are, factors that are not considered when we're looking at your work experience are your inability to get to work, the lack of work in your local area, the hiring practices of employers, technological changes in the industry where you once worked, changing economic conditions, clear that there's no job openings in your area, that an employer might not hire you even if you're capable of doing the work, and that you just really don't want to do a particular kind of work. All of those things are irrelevant when it comes to this work determination. There are vocational analysts that DDS uses to determine your ability to work and therefore calculate your RFC. If the vocational examiner thinks, yeah, you can work, you will not be allowed your claim. That's just the way it works. Okay? Okay, lastly, when do your benefits begin? They will be backdated to the date when you filed your initial application for disability. So maybe this process takes a year. Social Security, when you get your first payment, will be a check for all that time in between when you filed your initial application and the time that you are finally approved. Okay, so typically there's a big check that comes at the outset. Okay, all right, that is your brief overview, your thumbnail sketch of Social Security disability. This is actually a really great handbook. If you know anybody who might need Social Security disability, I would refer them to this book. I think it's a really helpful guide for people, and it's easy to read. So it's also downloadable, so you can take it with you wherever you go. But it is a very useful book. So okay, I hope that this gave you a bit of an overview. The same with workers' compensation. Really just looking for a brief overview. Part of the reason why is these two areas of law are changing all the time. The workforce is changing, technological advances are changing, medical advances are always bringing us to a point where certain diseases are going to fall off of lists that are acceptable, acceptable for a Social Security disability claim. There are all kinds of technological changes. So this changes all the time. The same with workers' compensation. But the broad overview is you need to have your medical ducks in a row. You need to be vigilant with DDS to make sure that your claims examiner is doing his or her job. And you need to recognize that there may be another vocational route that DDS, based on a vocational analysis of your RFC, is going to shuttle you towards. If you understand all of those things, then it's pretty straightforward to navigate. Okay? All right, that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm always here to answer questions. Thank you.